Hello, everyone. This is Umpire James. I wanted to try doing a video recording of AAR to get a quick overview for those who didn't have time to look at my long written one, or for those who wanted to see it more quickly. This is after action report of the Chickamauga game. It ran for 7 months from July of 2022 through January of this year, 2023. Um, Quite a long game, quite a large game. It had, I should have counted this beforehand. I think it had somewhere around 40 players. Let me count it real fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yeah, a little over 40 players, so quite large, quite a long game, but a lot of fun. And this is the semi-reenactment of the Chickamauga battle. So we had historical leaders at the battle. The order of battle was a little bit ahistorical in that it was balanced and even. So both sides had the same number of cavalry, artillery, and infantry. Although they were arranged a little bit differently, the Union cavalry was under a unified command under Brigadier General Mitchell, led by McCook and Crook, whereas the Confederates had a split command between Wheeler and Forrest, so they're a bit more broken up. And then the Confederates were led by General Bragg, and his corps were Longstreet, who led Kershaw, Johnson, and Law. And then he also had Major General Buckner, who led Stewart and Preston, Lieutenant General Hill, who led Claiborne and Breckinridge, Major General Walker, who led Gist and Liddell, and then Lieutenant General Polk, who led Cheatham and Hindman. And on the Union side, that army was led by General Rosecrans. He had Thomas's 24th Corps, which included Baird, Negley, Brannan, and Reynolds. McCook's 20th Corps, which had Davis, Johnson, and Sheridan. Crittenden's 21st Corps, which had Wood, Palmer, and Van Cleve. And then the reserve, which had Steedman and McCook Jr. Lots of McCooks in this game, and Crooks. It was very confusing. So the background of the battle historically was this was part of the Tullahoma campaign. This was set in the summer of 1863, and the Army of the Cumberland under Major General Rosecrans had moved southeast from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and forced the Confederate Army of the Tennessee under General Bragg to abandon Tennessee and withdraw southeast of Chattanooga, Georgia, which was a vital rail hub and important manufacturing center. But Bragg wasn't going to give up, so he was moving to. He had fresh reinforcements and was back on the offensive with plans to retake Chattanooga. And the two armies met just west of the Chickamauga Creek in some dense woodlands, and had a large 2-day battle, which historically was a Confederate victory. Now, our own battle was different in a lot of ways and similar in a lot of ways. As you can see from the map, it's heavily wooded, and I picked it partly because of the trees. Everyone complained about the trees, but I knew it'd give low visibility and add even more to the fog of war. You wouldn't be able to see what was going on. So that made it fun. The other thing that I did that added a lot of fog of war is I didn't give a map to the players, so no one was familiar with the terrain. Now, maybe some were familiar just from the battle itself, but I gave kind of a general map, and then I let each team had an engineer, which was allowed to scout out the terrain a little bit, for a certain time period preceding the actual battle, and they were able to draw their own map, which was partially complete and also not entirely correct because they had to go off of memory and screenshots. So that made it fun because everyone they didn't have a perfect map to refer to, so they were getting lost all the time, and added to a lot to the chaos and the fog of war. The engineers, at least engineer Merrill, had a fun time throughout the entire battle, just riding around the battlefield trying to complete his map, which looked pretty good by the end of it. So in terms of strategy, the Confederate plan, kind of a hammer and anvil strategy. So they planned to form, and let me pull up my reference map. They planned to place Longstreet in the center, kind of along here, just west of the Chickamauga. They wanted Hill and Polk up here, and then the reserve and Walker and Buckner down this way. And the goal was down in the south would be they would hold defensively. Longstreet would hold defensively and be kind of like a right thrust from the north. And then, if I understood it right, also Longstreet push it out that way. The Confederate plan was to, sorry, not the Confederate, the Union plan was to approach on multiple roads, but basically come up here along the main Lafayette Road, also with 20th Corps coming here from below, something like this. And the 20th Corps was supposed to be kind of a distraction, and I think the main thrust was supposed to come from the middle. That was the plan. Now, what really happened, and I'll draw it out a little bit, and then I'll show it in actual screenshots. So what really happened is the Union, they did get the ground they wanted pretty much. So they were arrayed along this road, but their distractionary force on the right actually became their main thrust, and so they spent a lot of time fighting over here at this ford, and by the end of the day, they had taken it and were something about like this. Let's see. Yeah. So their line looked something like that by the end of day one. And the Confederate line looked something like this. They had pulled back to about here. Let's see, I'm probably messing this up, but something like this. But what had happened is, of course, there's a good chunk of day one was just marching, a lot of chaos and figuring out where everyone was, lots of traffic jams. I think this point was named I think Johnson named it the Five Forks traffic jam or something. There's about 3 corps and I don't know how many divisions trying to get through this one point. And a lot of the generals had to play traffic cop to get the right people going through at the right time. But what happened is the Confederate left barely held on through day one, but didn't break entirely. But they had a lot of success on the right side where the Union had really gone to camp a little bit too early. And late in the day, just before dark, there was a big thrust between the cavalry and Johnson's division and Claiborne's division, and a little bit from Breckinridge's, if I recall. And so they wrecked Crittenden's corps and caused really heavy casualties really late on day one. So up until that point, it was looking like a Union, had I'd say the battle in their favor until that attack happened. They lost a lot of men at that point. And then on day two, both sides kind of doubled down on what they on their success from the day before. So the Confederates doubled down on attacking from the north, and the Union doubled down on attacking from the south. So they both were attacking on their right and ended up doing a kind of a cartwheel. But in the night, the Confederates had spent a lot of time uh, building defenses at the expense of their men's wakefulness and energy. But um, by early morning, they had new defensive line here, right along the ford, and then guarding off to the east. And they had, I think it was this road. They had a new defensive line here, and then all along here. So they had pretty strong defenses. And so when the Union attacked on the right, they found there's a little bit of rear guard action as the Confederates were trying to get everyone across the creek in time. It was a close thing, but they managed to do so. But then basically the Union found that they were behind the fences, behind a creek, very well defended, so a hard spot. So they shifted their attack. They went left and then shifted their attack this way where there's less defenses. But while all this was happening, the Confederates were attacking here and outnumbered the Union that was there. The Union had, again, some confusion as to who was supposed to be where. And so they managed to rout the whole left wing of the Union and kind of sweep south this way, and then basically send the whole Union army into retreat in this Confederate victory. So I'm going to stop drawing on here. I'm going to show actual screenshots. So I will show the, let's see, we'll show 5 p.m. on day one because it's labeled. So you can kind of see here the fight was in two sectors. Both sides had a right wing, left wing strategy, I would say, by the end of it. And so both wings were fighting each other. There's kind of a gap in the middle. You can see on day one, Law and Kershaw were struggling to keep the two sides connected the whole time. The Union weren't quite as connected, but they were I'd say, more the aggressor on the offensive. But you can see here, this is probably the height of the fighting, especially in the South. So by this point, you can see the Union had gotten across the ford. They'd spent a lot of time firing artillery and fighting before they managed to get across that's a bridge, that bridge there. They were also coming in from that side. So you can see they're coming in from all sides. They've got a lot of men broken and routing at this point. But still fairly good level of defense, a little bit of depth there, but not much. This guy's routing right here. So very close. But even by this point, you can see some of the Confederates had already started going back to make sure they got into camp in time. Because with the rules that we had, if you weren't in camp by a certain time, your men would be extra tired the following day. And so it was a consideration. Do you stay and fight longer into the night at the risk of your men being more tired the following day, or do you go to camp early, get the rest you need, and save the fighting for the next day? So each commander made that decision on their own. I'd say for the most part, people opted to go to sleep early and keep their men rested. But in general, I'd say the Union went more earlier, and that ended up, I think, being to their detriment. Because if they had maybe not retired some of the units but kept up the attack, they may have entirely broken this wing, and it would have. There's no way they would have escaped across the fords in time. They would have captured, a small corps or two. So that attack that was happening on day one towards the end. Also towards the end of the day, Thomas's corps came up kind of in the center, and it was pretty precarious for a little while because there's a gap between Kershaw here and I guess this is just this line right here. You can see a pretty big gap which could have been exploited. But Reynolds, I'm trying to remember. I think he got injured. I know Kershaw got injured. They both kind of got injured fighting here in the corner, and then Negley got injured 3 times, and it was close, but basically Kershaw was able to hold, and Thomas pulled back before he broke through the center. And then up here at the northwest side of the battlefield, we are in the midst of a pretty heavy melee attack. So we've got, let's see, who's this? This is Johnson's. Johnson had, I think, the largest division, and he's attacking with all of it. We've got Hill and Breckinridge over here on the right. We got Claiborne. I think that might be some of Law's men. Oh, here's Claiborne. Claiborne coming here, Law here. So they're all fighting what on the Union side was the reserve division, Steedman. We've got Crittenden's Corps over here, Palmer, Van Cleve, Cook. But already you can see a lot of them are starting to break, and they don't have a lot of defense. I think this is Wood's division right here is their only line, more trying to get in time. But it wasn't looking good. And so by the end of the day, almost all of Crittenden's Corps was routed, and by day 2 there wasn't much left. So pretty good assault by the Confederates here on the right. We'll go to later. Take a look at it. Let's see. So by the end of, I'll show this one. By the end of day 1, you can see most, it's dark now. Most folks are in their camps. There's still, the last vestiges of fighting here in the south with Johnson. Little had, these are Little's men, but small line of defense with some recovered men here in the trees, but both sides, sleeping on their guns for the night. You had 2 corps camped out here. You had Kershaw, and I think this is Law here, camped over here. And then this, you see most everyone's camping, but this is when Johnson's late attack and the cavalry late attack happened. And so this is almost all Crittenden's Corps with a little bit of the reserve as well, all being routed. And a lot of the Union Army had come back to their main headquarters. And we're having a council right here thinking the day's fighting was done, and all of a sudden thousands of men are pouring through the camp, being routed, and so they had to scramble and go stop them. And really the only thing that saved them was the darkness, because if that had kept going, this would have been routed all of day 1. But pretty soon it got too dark to do anything, and the Confederates had to pull back. So that was the end of day 1. So then on day 2, let's see, we'll do, I think I labeled this one. Yep. So I had to make an additional map extension because there was so much action going on over here that the original map didn't have anything here. I don't know if anyone noticed that or not. But by day 2, so the Union had doubled down on fighting over here with 20th Corps, but you can see that at this point, by 9 a.m., they were almost entirely across the ford. Preston fought a pretty good rearguard action against Sheridan, who was pretty aggressive at first, but then kind of held back at the end and let him escape. Mitchell spent most of both days far behind the Confederate line. He managed to burn some wagons. These are burned wagons, which he loves to do. But then on the second day, he was kind of hanging out back here, trying to find opportunities to attack the Confederates in the rear. But once they spotted him, they kept an eye on him and eventually sent some cavalry that way. Wheeler led a really early charge in the morning down here, and he managed to kill Johnson, who happened to be in the wrong position at the wrong time. It was unfortunate for him. But then Colonel Daugherty got to take over. But you can see here they're maneuvering to attack, but once they see the prepared breastworks and the Confederate position, and rightfully so. I wouldn't want to attack that either. They decided to shift left. There's actually, until Johnson got there, there's actually a big gap between Kershaw and Pearson over here. But I'll show you later. The main attack went that way. And then Thomas his corps originally was going left to attack where Kershaw and Law were, and then they got shifted right to join with 20th Corps and attack here. But by the time that happened, it was basically too late. By 9 a.m., this attack is already in full force. So we have Cheatham and Hindman and Breckinridge. Their divisions are all joined in a giant charge southward, straight into McCook and Steedman, and um, Wood had gotten up there. But you can see the Confederates outnumber them 2-1, maybe 3-1. This is McCook's men trying to get in the line quickly enough. They had been going south and then got some confusion about where they're supposed to be, so they went south and then went back north. But it's not looking good for them. The cavalry, the Union cavalry, had some early action up here in the field, and did heavy damage to the Confederate cavalry up there, Forrest's cavalry. But Forrest was backed up by his infantry, and so they weren't able to fully capitalize on it. And they're back here recovering. And then on the east side of this, we've got Woodsmen here, Beatties. Let's see. So this is what remains of, like, these units here are all that remain of Crittenden's corps. There's not much left. Brandon's getting into position, but Kershaw and Law were holding the line here. I think they got pretty nervous, but there was never any strong push, and eventually Beatty got worn down and retreated. And Johnson, you can see his men are all pretty tired. He moved back to the reserve here, which played a part later on. So let me go a little bit more forward in time. Let's see, we'll go to the last one I have. That's not the last one that exists because Loggy took it a little bit further, but it's the last one I have. And I do want to say, so I didn't do this by myself. I had a huge amount of help from Tunisgrad doing day one. He filled in while I was moving houses and did a great job, kept it going. And then I had help from Bazapek, and then finally Loggy, who helped me keep this going because it was quite a large game. It was a big undertaking, and I definitely would have ran out of steam if I hadn't had their help, so it was good. So this is the final state that I have, 1015. By this point, you can see a lot of wagons burning. Debrel, he didn't have much cavalry left to him, but he managed to get around the Union line and set the wagons on fire. By this point, you can see a desperate last defense from the Reserve Corps that's not going well. And then also another desperate last defense from Crittenden's Corps, also not going well. You can see some Confederates recovering here, and then I think this is Cleburne's men. They marched around a lot, being lost, but they're coming back here to support. And then you can see all the men that are running south or west. And then this is also showing the big attack here where Pearson was. So the Confederates had two smaller corps here defending. They ended up not having to do much, but held the line. And then Pearson was holding on for dear life here. They managed to get a breakthrough through that gap that I pointed out earlier. But then Johnson was there in reserve, and I don't have the screenshot, but I think within the next half hour, these brigades managed to come in and hit on the flank of these guys, and for pretty devastating result. And so they sent them running back too. So there may have, if it had just been against Pearson, there may have been a breakthrough here. But with Johnson arriving at just the right time, he broke that, and they all ran south. So like the historical battle, this was a decisive Confederate victory. And in many ways, it was more decisive than historical because the Confederates ended up north of the Union. So Chickamauga is up here to the, or not Chickamauga, Chattanooga is up here to the northwest. And so basically the Union, we played out the next 3 days of retreat and maneuver. And basically the Union had to retreat south and west, and the Confederates were able to move north and take Chattanooga, which historically didn't happen. And so for Confederates, it was a good win. Everyone played extremely well. It was fun to see all the chaos caused by the fog of war. Screenshots are very limited, so it was super frustrating, I'm sure, for them to know what was going on. I mean, if you're a commander, like these guys, for example, they might just see something like this, so you can see kind of the smoke of your men fighting, and not much more. So it's very hard to know what's going on, but they all did a good job, and it was a lot of fun to see. So I think I'll call it there. That's my wrap up. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.